Alright, welcome to another tutorial where you will learn how to improve your performance of your applications by using web compression and webpack production configurations. Because when you have a website, the speed depends heavily on your file sizes, and when it comes to webpack, it's very easy to exceed a certain number, like about 500 kilobytes in size. Is not uncommon when it comes to webpack files. So here I have some numbers. Well, this is the tutorial, but I had some numbers somewhere where, well, forget about that. Let's see how we can implement Brotli in our application, which is an encryption algorithm that allows us to, well, a compression algorithm that allows us to reduce the size of our applications by simply compressing all the files together and generating a way smaller build file. So let's create a new folder and set up a new project with webpack. Let's call it Brotli compression. Brotli is made by Google, and they have this amazing compression system that reduces the size of your files by a massive factor. So go to your desktop, Brotli compression 2. Wait, what? Brotli. And here I simply start a new project and I create several files, such as the source folder, dist folder, dist, and a few files, specifically webpack and app.js and our index.js HTML in our dist folder. This is just a typical application, and we'll see the differences in sizes between different build files and with compression and without compression. So we set a script source build.js, because here will go our combine file. So in our webpack configuration, I will simply take a simple webpack example that I have in another project. Let me show you. Here. So this is our project. Let's remove the compression right now, which is exactly this file, and just leave it without any plugins. So as you can see, we have an entry, which is Babel polyfill, which is necessary for using async functions, a join, which is path join, basically to create that path, the output, which is build.js in our dist folder. By the way, the entry is app.js. We have Babel loader for React applications with the presets, and style loader for style CSS files, which is a CSS preprocessor. So yeah, let's create a simple React application by importing React and the render. Then we do a function app, and return a dist which says setup complete. Then we render app into our document query selector root, and we need to include the root dist in our HTML index file. Awesome. Now if we need to install several things. So let's go ahead and run a few installs. I'm using Yarn, which is just like an alternative to npm. You can use it with the same results, it's just slightly faster. So yarn add. This is the same as doing npm install, just so you know. Let's install. Let me check the webpack configuration. We need bubble core, add bubble / core, bubble polyfill, bubble loader, react DOM, add bubble preset env, add bubble preset react. By the way, the def flag is for saving all those dependencies into the def dependencies in our package.json. React, we need stylus loader, css loader, style loader, and for now that's all. Well, let's install our plugin right now. Brotli and Gzip webpack plugin. What that plugin does is it simply compresses our files, our build file, our generated webpack file, you know, into a smaller size. It generates several things: the general build file, which is a JavaScript file, then the build.js gzip compressed file, and the build.js with Brotli compression. Brotli is the most efficient one, so that's why we're using it. Alright, we're installing the packages. Yeah, I think we need to install also webpack, but we'll see in a moment. Now let's add a few scripts in our package.json. And let's say compile. Let's say compile def. We'll also see how to use webpack with production configuration and development configuration. Compile def is to compile webpack for a developer configuration. Compile production. The difference between a production and a development compilation is the size of it, because when you compile to dev, the size is way bigger, because the focus is to generate the fastest build file possible. Because when you're developing, you're generating multiple files, multiple builds with new changes every few seconds, so it's important to generate those files quickly. The size is not that relevant because you're just simply developing. And when you're using production, the P flag, you're basically compressing all the files with webpack. They do all their own configurations, modifications, whatever, and they generate a way smaller file. But we can improve upon that. That's why we'll learn how to use Brotli with Gzip. These are compression algorithms that browsers can understand and can basically process them into generating way smaller files. So yeah, and let's set up also a server. We need to set up a server. Node server.js, new file, server.js, const express. We also need express. Let me check another project to see how I set up this server. I have join, I have a port. Yeah, let's copy all this. Basically, I'm just saying, I'm just setting an app, then a port, which will be 8000. We're using body parser JSON to be able to receive JSON files from the client. We're using this to process URLs. We're using a logger. This simply logs our request. It says the method, the URL, and the time. And here is where the things get interesting. The build.js file is the one that will be requested by index here. And here we'll send a different variation of the file depending on the browser. For now, we are just sending the build.js file from the this folder, which will be generated in a moment. and we are using this general middleware to send the index file for any other requests. And finally, we're starting a server. This 0000 URL indicates that we want to make this app available to all of our local devices, so that we can connect on our phone, on our computer, on different computers. That's very useful indeed. So yeah, let's install Express and body parsers, and since we need those body parsers, since we need those for our server file. Now let's do yarn run compile dev, and you'll see that we generate can resolve source. Let me check our config. Let me check. Oh wow, I didn't update the right configuration file. Let me take this one and paste it into my file. All right. Now let's run this again, compile dev. And it will, in some cases, it will ask you to install Webpack. So that's why I'm gonna install it, Webpack and Webpack CLI, because sometimes you need it. I already have it globally installed, so I don't need it, but it's very recommended that you install them in your project specifically. That's why we're running our commands from our package.json scripts, because that way we are using local dependencies that have been installed for this particular project. Man, this takes forever. All right. Now let's do again yarn run compile dev, so you can see the build.js file being generated, which is right there. And now we can do a run start to start our server. If I go to my browser, join is not defined. Okay, so join in our server has not been defined. Let's set up join. By the way, these curly brackets are for importing a specific component of our library, which in this case path. Let's run the server again. Reload this page. Setup complete. As you can see, it's set up without any errors. That's awesome. Let's now analyze the performance of this. Let's take a look at the network tab. This is a very interesting tab, because you can see many different parameters of the speed of your application. Let's reload the page, and you will see all the elements being downloaded. So we have our build file, which is 3.6 megabytes in size, and that takes about 100 milliseconds. Now that's not realistic, because we're using a local network, and that is way faster. You have all the files downloaded. So let's use one of those presets. Fast 3G is like emulating an actual connection, an actual 3G connection. Let's reload this. And now our build file takes way more, because that's downloading the files from the network. It's simulating the download. When I have them here, it's already downloaded, so it doesn't take any longer to get them. As you can see, it takes a while to get all the build file, because it's about 4 megabytes. It's 3.5 megabytes in size, and that took 30 seconds. Let's write down these numbers. 20 seconds, about 20 seconds. 3.6 megabytes. That is Webpack dev without compression. Now let's do Webpack production without compression. How do we do that? Well, we basically run the compile command again, yarn run compile production, which is the one that we set up here in our script. Compile prod, this is the one being executed, and that is generated. All right, let's reload this. and see how long it takes to download this new file. What happened? Oh yeah, I have to set up the server also. Yarn run start. Now it's reloading. Nice, you see, the file is way smaller. It's 200 kilobytes. Let's try again. There you go, 200 kilobytes and 1.7 seconds. That is way faster. The size is almost, I don't know, 90% smaller. It's a very noticeable increase in speed. Now let's do webpack production with compression. Now to implement compression, which is exactly what we need, we have to go to webpack and uncomment, or basically install this dependency, Brotli Gzip webpack plugin. So go ahead, yarn or npm, you can do npm, but I'm using yarn, so yarn at dev Brotli Gzip webpack plugin. Once that is installed, you import it here like this. You can say whatever name here, and then in your plugin section you create an array which contains the Brotli file that you imported with a new keyword, and you set up these parameters. This is important because asset has to be file.br and query. Query is in case you want to add some parameters like a token or something for your specific file in case you have multiple files. And the file here is the file name. In this case it will be build.js. So the file will be build.js.br. That's the compressed file. Then we'll use the algorithm and test. This is for the files that we want to have compressed. In this case it will only be applied to build because HTML index is not affected by this webpack configuration in particular, but it will work if you're using it for all these different files. Threshold, I don't know what's that, but whatever. The mean ratio, that's also another configuration, and the quality, that's the one that we want to configure. If you set it to 0, there won't be any compression. I mean, maybe something, but I'm not sure. And if you set it to 11, which is the maximum value, you will have the largest compression. Now the problem with this is that it takes a few seconds to generate the build file because it's compressing, it's reducing the size of it. And you don't want to do this in development, because when you are using a development configuration, you want to have fast build files so that you can test different changes quickly without having to wait a few seconds every time you make a change. This is for production, when you have your application completed and you want to deliver it. Now the gzip, there's another block we can do the same block but with gzip, which is gz in the asset. We are using the gzip configuration for compressing. Now this is in cases where the browser may not understand Brotli, because it's quite a new compression algorithm, and gzip is usually more traditional. People understand it, and browsers are able to read it. Now in our server we need to make a few changes. When we send our build.js file, we need to make, instead of sending this file, well, before that let me run the webpack configuration. Run compile prot. So we are running the compilation in production with our compression algorithms set up. You can see we have multiple things here. We have, can I zoom? No, I cannot zoom it. We have a build.js, a build.js.br, and a build.js.gz. That means we have these two compressed files that we can send to the browser, and it will understand it in case the browser is able to understand it. Browsers such as Chrome work with Brotli because they are more modern, but others may not, so we have to use GC in cases where they are not allowed. Now let me take a look at my notes so that I can see exactly the configuration that we need. So yeah, all right, the first thing we do is we write an if that says if request headers or no, header without an S, and we say accept encoding includes BR. BR is Brotli, which is the algorithm used. If the browser accepts this type of file, if they can read it, if they can understand it, we simply send our res send file join their name dist, and we send the build.js.br. We are sending the compressed file to the browser. The browser is able to uncompress it and understand it. And now we need to include a few more parameters, such as the headers, the content encoding. Let me see how that looks like. res.set content encoding, and this will be Brotli or BR, I don't know if that's the one. Yes, BR. This is to help the browser understand what's exactly inside that compressed file. We're telling it this is a Brotli file, and then we are setting a new one that says, yeah, content type application JavaScript. This is to tell it that we are sending a JavaScript file which is compressed with Brotli. You don't need this too. These are headers that we sent as a response, but we don't need it. But it's highly recommended that you set them up, because it may speed up the process. I'm not too sure about the speed of it, but it's recommended. So let's try another one with gzip files. We'll copy the same thing, we paste it, and instead of using BR we use gzip, like that. And here we say gzip, I think gzip, right? Oh, this is gc, like that. And we send the gz build file. And else, if the browser doesn't understand any of those files, we simply send the uncompressed version, which is this one. You see? Now let's make sure we are actually being called. So let's set up a console log that says calling Brotli, another one that says calling gzip, and a last one that says calling uncompressed. Now that's all we need to set up. This is only the only thing that we need to set up, and we can just simply start our server again. So if we reload the page, now you'll see a major improvement in speed. Now the size of the build file is 60 kilobytes, and it's loaded in less than a second. That's amazing. That's exactly what we need. So let's write down all those speeds. You see, from 20 seconds to 800 milliseconds, which is barely a second, and this is like half the time. You see, it's almost double the speed in receiving the file. Now you can notice here that we sent 200 kilobytes, but then we received 300 kilobytes in resources. That means when we uncompress all those files, we have around 300 kilobytes, which is about 100 more. That's irrelevant, that just so you know that we are actually sending the files. And it says build.js. It doesn't say the compressed version. But if we click on it, you will see in the response headers the content encoding is BR, exactly what we set here, content encoding BR. And the application is JavaScript. Content type is application JavaScript, which is a JavaScript file. And that's it. I mean, now let's try to see that, but with the gzip, to see if it works. By the way, in the browser you see the console log here, calling Brotli. Now let's do the same thing, but with gzip. Let's uncomment all this. Okay, now reload the server. You see, I'm only allowing this block to run. Let's reload this. and now it's about 68 kilobytes. It's almost the same in size, but it's slightly slower. Now most people won't even notice, but now that you're doing it, it makes sense to actually use it. Use the best performing algorithm for compressing all your files, you know. So it doesn't hurt to have both of them set up. It's just barely 100 milliseconds in difference. But when you have hundreds of thousands of users downloading your file, you want to have the fastest speeds possible. So yeah, that's, if we click it, you see the content encoding is gzip, exactly what we said here, and the application is JavaScript. Now if we send the uncompressed version, which is this last one, I don't know if this will work. Let's try it. Let's run the server and reload it. By the way, to reload it and clean the cache, you can just hold this button and then click on here. With the Chrome tools open, you have to have this open. You can right click and open this with inspect. So if we go to Perf network, you will notice that we have the same file as we have the same file size as we had before, and the content type is set up. There is no compression basically. So yeah, that's what we get, from 20 seconds to 800 milliseconds. Now let's uncomment all this and set it up like this as before. And let's try another last thing, which is which is running on a slower network. Let's use slow 3G. That will actually make a larger difference when it comes to downloading files. This is on a phone that takes forever to download. You see, it took 3 seconds. If we remove all this and we use only the uncompressed version, you will notice a major difference in speeds when it comes to slow networks. Remember the last one took 3 seconds, and this one is already 5 seconds, double the time in download, you know. So yeah, it makes sense to use compression in your projects, and it's very easy to set up, as you already saw. Remember to simply import this Brotli Gzip configuration plugin and then set up the plugins block with these parameters. And remember that the quality has to be 11. If you're using development, you want to set this as 0 so that you don't have to compress all the files constantly. But when you're producing, when you're using production, when you're delivering your files, you want to use the highest quality possible to reduce the size as much as possible. Alright, and the server, you need a block for all your files. You need to send the compressed version like this with the headers. They are not obligatory, not mandatory, but they're useful, you know. And that's it. Hope you understood something, and you now use compression in your project so that they're faster and they take way less time to load. See you in the next video.